I thrown out at 17 for keeping my baby. Years later my parents knocked, but my son's words turned their regret into punishment they deserved. When I got pregnant at 17, my mom slapped me and said, "It's either the baby or us." My dad shouted, "Get out! You've disgraced us." By morning, all my things were in black trash bags on the porch. I slept in a shelter, worked double shifts, and built a life from scratch. Years later, they came knocking. My son opened the door. My father just stared and whispered, "He looks just like." That moment had played out in my mind countless times over the 11 years since I'd last seen my parents. I'd imagined everything from tearful reconciliations to slamming the door in their faces, but now that it was happening, all I felt was a strange hollowness as I stood in the hallway watching my father's face transform from shock to recognition. My son, Elijah, stood in the doorway with his hands still on the doorknob, his dark curls falling across his forehead in the same way his father's had. The resemblance was uncanny. "Who are you?" Elijah asked, his voice steady. At 10 years old, he was perceptive and direct, unfazed by the strangers at our door. My mother stood slightly behind my father, her hand clasped over her mouth. She looked older, more fragile than I remembered, but her eyes, those sharp, judgmental eyes, hadn't changed a bit. "Elijah," I called out, my voice steadier than I expected. "Come here, please." He turned, spotted me, and immediately moved to my side. Always intuitive, he seemed to sense the tension crackling in the air. "These are your grandparents," I said simply. Elijah tilted his head, studying them with the same intense focus he applied to complex math problems. "I didn't know I had grandparents," he said finally. "Everyone has grandparents," my mother said, her voice trembling slightly. We haven't met before." "Why not?" Elijah asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. I placed my hand on his shoulder, drawing strength from his solid presence beside me. "That's complicated," I said. "Why don't you go finish your homework while I talk to them?" Elijah glanced up at me, clearly reluctant to leave. "Are you okay, Mom?" The protective concern in his voice nearly broke me. My son, my brilliant, compassionate son, worried about me, not knowing these people had left me homeless and pregnant at 17. "I'm fine," I assured him, giving his shoulder a gentle squeeze. "I'll call you when we're done." He nodded slowly, then turned to head back to his room, but not before giving my parents one last appraising look. Only when his bedroom door clicked shut did I return my attention to the two people who had once been my entire world. "You should come in," I said, stepping aside. The neighbors loved to gossip. They hesitated for a moment before crossing the threshold into our home. My home. The one I'd purchased 3 years ago after being promoted to head nurse at Memorial Hospital. It wasn't extravagant, but it was comfortable, warm, and filled with evidence of a happy life. Elijah's art projects displayed proudly on the walls, photos of our camping trips, bookshelves overflowing with both his adventure novels and my medical texts. I led them to the living room, gesturing toward the sofa while I remained standing. I wasn't ready to settle in for a cozy chat. "He's beautiful," my mother said, breaking the silence. Her gaze darted around the room, lingering on the photos of Elijah as a toddler on the beach, graduating kindergarten, winning the science fair last year. "Yes, he is," I agreed. There was no point denying that Elijah was the center of my world, the reason I'd pushed through countless nights of exhaustion, study sessions after double shifts, and the bone-deep loneliness of building a life with no safety net. "He looks like—" my father started, then stopped abruptly. "Like Jason," I finished for him. "Yes, he does." My father's jaw tightened at the mention of Jason's name. 11 years ago, when I told them I was pregnant, they had immediately blamed him, called him worthless, said he was going nowhere. The fact that Jason had been accepted to UCLA on a soccer scholarship meant nothing to them. All they saw was that their daughter's future was ruined by a boy from the wrong side of town. What they never bothered to learn was that Jason had offered to defer college to stay and help raise our child. It was I who insisted he go, knowing that his scholarship was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We promised to make it work long distance. We were young and naive and in love. We didn't account for how difficult it would be to maintain a relationship across states while he balanced college soccer and classes, and I juggled a newborn, shelter life, and eventually community college. We tried for 3 years before accepting that we had grown in different directions. The split was amicable. We still talked occasionally, and Jason sent child support faithfully, visited when he could. He was a good father, even if distance limited his presence in Elijah's daily life. "Why are you here?" I asked finally, cutting through the uncomfortable silence. My parents exchanged glances. My mother clutched her purse tighter on her lap, a nervous habit I remembered from childhood. "Your father had a heart attack," she said. 3 months ago." I felt a flicker of something, concern perhaps, but it was distant, muted by years of forced indifference. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I didn't wish them ill. "Are you recovered?" I directed this to my father. He nodded stiffly. "Triple bypass. Doctor says I'm doing well, but..." He trailed off, and for the first time in my life I saw uncertainty in his eyes. "It made us think," my mother continued, about what's important, about family." I almost laughed at the irony but managed to swallow it down. "Family?" I repeated, the word feeling foreign on my tongue when applied to them. "That's interesting, considering the last time we spoke about family, you made it very clear I was no longer part of yours." My mother flinched as if I'd slapped her the same way she had slapped me all those years ago when I told her I was pregnant. "We made a mistake," my father said. The admission clearly costing him. My father had never been one to admit error. In his world, he was always right. His decisions beyond question. "A mistake?" I echoed. "Is that what you call throwing your pregnant teenage daughter out onto the street? Leaving her homeless, terrified, and alone?" The words hung in the air between us, heavy with 11 years of unspoken pain. We were shocked. "Disappointed," my mother began. "Disappointed?" I cut her off. "I was 17 and scared out of my mind. I needed my parents, and instead you threw my belongings into garbage bags and tossed me away like trash." My voice had risen, and I forced myself to take a deep breath. The last thing I wanted was for Elijah to hear this conversation. "Do you have any idea what it was like?" I continued, my voice lower but intense. "Sleeping in a shelter surrounded by strangers, working double shifts at the diner while my ankles swelled and my back screamed in pain, giving birth alone." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Mackenzie, please." "No," I said firmly. "You don't get to come here after 11 years and expect me to make this easy for you. Where were you when I needed advice or help, or just someone to tell me I was doing okay as a mother?" My father cleared his throat, his discomfort evident. "We're not asking for forgiveness." "Good," I interrupted, "because I'm not sure I have that to give." A heavy silence fell over the room. Through the window, I could hear Mrs. Abernathy next door calling for her cat. The familiar sound oddly grounding in this surreal moment. "We'd like to know our grandson," my mother said finally. "If you'll allow it." And there it was, the real reason for their sudden reappearance in my life. Not genuine remorse, not a desperate desire to make amends with their daughter. They wanted access to Elijah. "Elijah doesn't need people in his life who might decide he's disposable when he makes a mistake," I said coldly. "Because children make mistakes. That's part of growing up. The difference is I'll never abandon him for it." My father's face reddened. "That's not fair, Mackenzie." "Not fair." I felt a laugh bubble up, slightly hysterical. "You want to talk to me about what's fair? Was it fair to throw me out without a penny to my name? Was it fair to change your phone number so I couldn't even call when I went into labor 2 months early? Was it fair to leave me wondering if my baby would survive while I sat alone in the NICU day after day?" My hands were shaking now, and I clasped them together to steady myself. "Mom." All heads turned toward Elijah's voice. He stood in the hallway, concern etched on his young face. "Everything's okay, honey," I said, trying to inject a calmness into my voice that I didn't feel. He frowned, unconvinced. "You're upset." "Sometimes adults have difficult conversations," I explained. "But I'm okay, I promise." He hesitated, then moved into the room, coming to stand beside me. Automatically, my arm went around his shoulders. my anchor, my reason for everything. My mother was staring at him, drinking in every detail. You must be in 5th grade, she guessed. Elijah nodded. Yes, ma'am. Always so polite, my son. I'd raised him to be respectful, even to strangers, even to the grandparents who had rejected him before he was born. Do you like school? My father asked awkwardly. I love school, Elijah said. Especially science and math. I'm in the advanced program. I couldn't help the pride that swelled in my chest. Despite everything, despite the challenges of single motherhood, despite the financial struggles of his early years, Elijah was thriving. He was kind, intelligent, and confident in a way I hadn't been at his age. He's at the top of his class, I added, unable to resist. The school wants him to skip 6th grade next year. My parents exchanged glances again, and I could read the surprise in their expressions. Perhaps they had expected their ruined daughter to produce a troubled child, evidence that their harsh judgment had been correct. Instead, they were faced with living proof that I had succeeded despite their abandonment, not because of it. That's remarkable, my mother said softly. You must be very proud. I am, I confirmed. Every single day. Elijah shifted beside me, clearly uncomfortable with being the center of attention. Can I get a snack, Mom? He asked. Of course. There are apple slices in the fridge. As he left for the kitchen, my father leaned forward. Mackenzie, we know we can't undo what we did, but we're asking for a chance, just a chance, to be part of your lives moving forward. I studied their faces, searching for the truth beneath the words. Were they genuinely remorseful, or was this simply fear of mortality making them seek absolution? I need to think about it, I said finally. This isn't just about me anymore, it's about Elijah and what's best for him. Of course, my mother said quickly. We understand. But did they? Did they understand that for 11 years I had protected Elijah from the knowledge that his grandparents had rejected him before he was even born? That I had carefully constructed explanations when he asked about my parents, never wanting him to feel the sting of their rejection. We're staying at the Holiday Inn on Westbrook Avenue, my father said, reaching into his pocket for a business card. He wrote a number on the back before placing it on the coffee table. Our room number and my cell. We'll be in town for a week. I nodded but made no move to pick up the card. Thank you for seeing us, my mother said, rising to her feet. My father followed suit, and for letting us meet him, even briefly. I walked them to the door, maintaining a careful distance. As they stepped outside, my mother turned back. You've done well for yourself, she said, her eyes moving from me to take in the modest but well-kept home behind me. You're a good mother. Better than, she trailed off, but the implication hung in the air. Better than she had been. I didn't confirm or deny it. Instead, I simply said goodbye and closed the door. I stood there for a moment, my forehead resting against the cool wood, trying to process the hurricane of emotions their unexpected visit had stirred up. Anger, hurt, vindication, and somewhere beneath it all, a small, stubborn flicker of a longing for parental approval that had never quite died. Mom, Elijah appeared at my side, apple slices in hand. Are you crying? I hadn't realized tears had escaped until he pointed it out. Quickly, I wiped them away. Just a little overwhelmed, I admitted. Were those really my grandparents? He asked. I nodded, leading him to the couch where my parents had sat moments before. Yes. Why haven't I met them before? The question I had been dreading. I had always promised myself I would be honest with Elijah, age appropriately. But how do you tell a child that his grandparents had deemed him a disgrace before he was even born? When I told them I was pregnant with you, I began carefully. They were very upset. They didn't want me to have you. We had a big fight, and they asked me to leave their house. Elijah's brow furrowed as he processed this. Because of me? No, I said firmly, taking his hands in mine. Not because of you, because they were scared and angry and made a terrible decision. They thought having a baby at my age would ruin my life. Did I ruin your life? He asked, his voice small. My heart shattered at the question. Elijah, look at me, I said, waiting until his eyes met mine. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. Every day with you is a gift. Having you didn't ruin my life. You gave me a reason to build a better one than I might have had otherwise." He seemed to consider this. "But it was hard, right? Being a mom when you were young." I nodded, seeing no reason to lie. Yes, it was hard. There were times when I was very tired, very scared, and felt very alone. But not once, not for a single moment, did I ever regret having you. Why are they here now after all this time?" I sighed, brushing his curls back from his forehead. "Your grandfather had a heart attack. I think it scared them, made them realize life is short. They say they want to be part of our lives now." "Do you want that?" he asked, perceptive as always. "I don't know," I admitted. "Well, they did hurt me very deeply, Elijah. It's not easy to forgive something like that." "Miss Rodriguez says holding on to anger only hurts yourself," he said, referencing his school counselor's wisdom. "She says forgiveness is for you, not for the other person." I smiled despite myself. Miss Rodriguez is very wise. "So you should forgive them," he concluded with the simple logic of childhood. "But that doesn't mean you have to let them back in if they're going to hurt you again." Sometimes my son's emotional intelligence astounded me. "When did you get so smart?" I asked, pulling him into a hug. He hugged me back tightly. "I get it from my mom." That night, after Elijah was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, my father's business card in front of me. Memories washed over me, not just of the day they threw me out, but of everything that came after. I remembered Teresa, the shelter volunteer, who had helped me apply for emergency assistance programs. Mona, my boss at the diner, who let me sit down when the dining room was empty and brought me extra food from the kitchen. Dr. Patel, who delivered Elijah and then helped me get a job as a hospital orderly when I couldn't afford daycare on a waitress's salary. These strangers had shown me more kindness than my own parents. They, along with a network of others, had become my chosen family over the years. And then there was Elijah, born 6 weeks premature, so tiny in the NICU incubator that my heart stopped every time I looked at him. I had sat beside him day and night singing softly, telling him stories about the life we would have together once we got out of there. I promised him then that I would give him everything, that I would never let him feel unwanted or unloved for even a second of his life. I had kept that promise, through community college classes squeezed between work shifts, through nursing school with a toddler on my hip, through every struggle and triumph that followed. I had built us a good life, a stable home, a future. Did my parents deserve to be part of that? Did they deserve Elijah? My phone buzzed with a text message from Jason. "Hey Mac, just checking in. How's our little genius doing with the science project?" I smiled, tapping out a reply about Elijah's latest obsession with renewable energy. I attached a photo of his prototype wind turbine model, its small blades spinning steadily in front of a desk fan. He'd stayed up late 3 nights in a row fine-tuning it, his determination reminding me so much of his father. The turbine had been Jason's suggestion during their last video call. He'd sent Elijah links to instructional videos and diagrams, then patiently guided him through the trickier parts over FaceTime. That was Jason, present even from a distance. Looking at the photo I'd just sent, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. Despite everything, Elijah had a father who cared deeply about him, who made time for him, who celebrated his successes and helped him through his struggles. Jason and I had managed to forge a functional co-parenting relationship despite the distance. It hadn't been easy, especially in those early years when resentment and disappointment threatened to override our good intentions. But we pushed through the hard conversations, set boundaries, learned to compromise. He had married 2 years ago to a kind woman named Leah, who treated Elijah with genuine affection during his summer visits to California. I still remembered my anxiety the first time Elijah met her. The fear that this stranger might reject my son or try to replace me in his life. Instead, Leah had approached their relationship with patience and respect, never overstepping, but always making Elijah feel welcome in their home. They were expecting their first child together in a few months, and Elijah was thrilled about becoming a big brother. He'd already started saving his allowance to buy a gift for the baby. had picked out books he thought would be good to read to a younger sibling. His generosity made my heart ache with pride. My phone buzzed again with Jason's reply. "That looks incredible. Tell him I'm proud of him. Also, does he need any more materials? I can order some stuff for when he visits this summer." Thinking we could build a solar panel setup next. This was what healthy family looked like. Not perfect, not without complications, but fundamentally rooted in love and commitment. Jason had never abandoned us, even when our romantic relationship ended. He had grown from a scared teenage boy into a responsible man who prioritized his son. I still remember the conversation we'd had in that tiny apartment above the laundromat. Both of us crying as we admitted our relationship wasn't working anymore. Both of us terrified about what that would mean for our 3-year-old son. But Jason had looked me in the eye and promised, "I will never disappear from his life, no matter what." And he had kept that promise, driving 4 hours each way some weekends just to spend the day with Elijah when he couldn't afford a hotel room, sending child support even during the months he was between jobs, calling regularly, showing up for important events whenever possible. He had made mistakes, as had I, but we had worked through them together, always putting Elijah first. My parents, on the other hand, had simply walked away. 11 years of birthdays, Christmases, school performances, all missed because they had been too prideful, too concerned with appearances to support their daughter when she needed them most. I thought about Elijah's 5th birthday party held in the small community room at the apartment complex where we lived then. He'd asked about his grandparents that day, watching as his friends' grandparents arrived bearing gifts and kisses. I'd managed a vague explanation about them living far away, unable to make myself tell my innocent 5-year-old that they had chosen not to be in his life. Then, there was his first piano recital at age 7, when he'd scanned the audience hopefully before playing his simple rendition of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. His 3rd grade graduation when families were taking multi-generational photos, and it was just the two of us posing for the school photographer. The father-son campout that Jason had flown in specially to attend while no grandparents showed up for Grandparent Day at school the very next week. Year after year, milestone after milestone, absent because they couldn't get past their own disappointment and judgment. And yet they were here now. Too late, certainly. But here. The question was, did that matter? After 3 days of internal debate, I called the number on my father's card. We agreed to meet at a park near my house, neutral territory, where Elijah could play while we talked. When we arrived, my parents were already there, sitting stiffly on a bench near the playground. My mother had brought a gift bag, which she clutched nervously as we approached. "Hello," I said, keeping my tone even. "Elijah, you remember your grandparents?" He nodded, eyeing them cautiously. "Hello." "We brought you something," my mother said, extending the bag. "Your mother used to love building things when she was your age, so we thought—" Elijah looked to me for permission before accepting the gift. Inside was an advanced building set, the kind with gears and motors that could create moving structures. "Thank you," he said politely, genuine interest lighting his eyes as he examined the box. "Would it be okay if I go try out the monkey bars?" he asked me, clearly seeking an escape from the awkward interaction. "Sure, but stay where I can see you," I replied. Once he was out of earshot, I turned back to my parents. "I thought about what you said." They waited, tension evident in their postures. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," I said. "Honestly, what you did, it changed everything for me. Not just practically, but how I see myself, how I trust people. You were supposed to be the ones who loved me unconditionally, and you failed at that in the most fundamental way." My mother's eyes filled with tears again. But I pressed on. "But Elijah deserves to know his family as long as that family treats him with the respect and love he deserves. So, I'm willing to allow supervised visits here at the park, or at similar public places while you're in town." Relief washed over their faces. It wasn't full forgiveness, not even close, but it was a small opening in the door I had firmly shut years ago. "There are conditions," I continued. "You will never criticize my parenting or my life choices in front of him. You will never make him feel that his existence was a mistake. And you will understand that I have the right to end this arrangement any time if I feel it's not in his best interest." "We understand," my father said solemnly. My mother nodded in agreement. though I could see her struggling with the limited nature of the access I was granting. She had probably imagined immediate family dinners, holidays together, a complete restoration of familial bonds. But relationships, once broken, don't heal overnight, if they heal at all. I have questions, I said. Things I need to understand before we can move forward. Anything, my mother said quickly. Did you ever try to find me after you threw me out? They exchanged uncomfortable glances. My mother began, then faltered. We thought you would come back, my father admitted after a few days when you realized how difficult it would be on your own. When you didn't, we assumed you'd gone to live with Jason or his family. The irony was bitter. Jason's family had been just as unsupportive as mine. His father had kicked him out when he learned about the pregnancy, though Jason's mother had slipped him money when she could. Neither of us had had a safety net. And after Elijah was born, you never wondered about your grandchild. More uncomfortable silence. We were still angry, my mother said, finally, stubborn. And then as more time passed, it became harder to know how to reach out. We didn't know where you were, what you were doing. I was at community college, I said flatly, then nursing school, working at Memorial Hospital since graduation. I've been in the same city the entire time. I wasn't hiding. My father had the grace to look ashamed. Pride is a terrible thing, Mackenzie. It keeps you from admitting mistakes until it's almost too late. I glanced over at Elijah, who was carefully navigating the monkey bars, his face set in concentration. It's already too late for some things, I said quietly. You missed his first steps, his first words. You missed his first day of school, his kindergarten graduation. You can't get those moments back. We know, my mother whispered. But we're here now. If you'll let us, we'd like to be part of the moments still to come. I studied them, these familiar strangers who shared my blood, but had become alien to me through their absence. My father's hair had gone completely gray, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. My mother's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her purse. Was that age or nervousness? They were physically present before me, yet they felt like ghosts, remnants of a life I'd left behind. I remembered how my father used to carry me on his shoulders at the county fair, how my mother would brush my hair at night while humming softly. I remembered Sunday morning pancakes and bedtime stories, and being tucked in with kisses. I remembered being loved, until I wasn't. That was the part that still cut deepest, the knowledge that their love had been conditional all along, that all those moments of warmth and security had come with invisible strings I hadn't known about until I pulled one, and everything unraveled. Could people who had turned their backs so completely ever truly change? They were older now, softened perhaps by age and their recent brush with mortality. The heart attack must have been terrifying. That moment when my father realized his own mortality, perhaps wondered who would be at his funeral if he died. Was that what it took to remember you had a daughter, a grandson? The fear of dying alone. But were they different at their core? Had they truly changed, or were they simply seeking to ease their consciences before it was too late? Would they disappear again when reconciliation proved more difficult than they'd anticipated? When they realized that forgiveness wouldn't be given freely, that trust would need to be earned back penny by excruciating penny. I studied my mother's face, the face that had once been my entire world, the first face I'd recognized as an infant, the face that had contorted with disgust and disappointment when I told her I was pregnant. I searched for sincerity in her eyes, for genuine remorse. Time will tell, I said finally, neither committing to forgiveness nor closing the door completely. But I want you to understand something. Elijah is my priority always. If at any point I feel this relationship isn't healthy for him, it ends. No discussion. I needed them to understand that while I might be willing to risk my own heart in this tentative reconnection, I would never risk my son's. I would never allow him to experience the devastation of abandonment that I had known. We wouldn't expect anything less, my father said quietly, a hint of respect in his voice that I hadn't heard in a long time. My mother nodded, blinking back tears. We understand, Mackenzie, truly. They were saying all the right things now, but words were easy. It was actions that would reveal their true intentions. They nodded, accepting these terms. My father cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably on the bench. There's something else we wanted to discuss with you. He glanced at my mother, who gave a slight nod of encouragement. Your mother and I have been talking, and we'd like to help with Elijah's education, set up a college fund. I stiffened. We don't need your money. It's not about need, my mother interjected. It's about wanting to contribute something positive to make up in some small way for what we didn't provide before. I thought about all the times I'd worked overtime to afford Elijah's advanced program fees, all the budget stretching to provide him with books and science kits and summer enrichment programs. He deserved every opportunity, and I had moved mountains to give them to him. I'll think about it, I conceded. But don't think you can buy your way back into our lives. Elijah needs consistency, not gifts and money. We understand, my father said. As we prepared to leave, my father asked hesitantly, Same time tomorrow? I nodded. Elijah has karate until 4, so we can meet here at 4:30. We'll be here, my mother promised. As Elijah and I walked to the car, he asked, Are they going to be in our lives now? Like for real? I buckled him into his seat before answering. I don't know yet, honey. We're taking it slow, seeing how it goes. They seem sad, he observed, and kind of nervous. They have regrets, I explained, about the choices they made. Sometimes when you realize you've made a big mistake, it's hard to know how to fix it. Like when I broke your favorite mug and tried to glue it back together, but it still had all those cracks. I smiled at the comparison. Something like that. Some broken things can never be perfectly fixed. They might function again, but they'll always show where they were damaged. He considered this. I think I like my other grandparents better. Leah's mom and dad always play games with me when I visit. That's good, I said, starting the car. You're lucky to have them in your life. But it's good to have more people who care about you, right? He asked. That's what you always say. Yes, I agreed, pulling out of the parking lot. As long as they truly do care. The next day at the park, my mother brought photo albums, pictures of me as a child that Elijah had never seen. He laughed at my unfortunate elementary school haircuts and gap-toothed smiles. My father taught him a card game I had forgotten learning as a child. There were moments, brief fleeting moments, when it almost felt normal, almost. But beneath it all ran the undercurrent of what had been lost, what had been thrown away. 11 years of silence couldn't be erased by a few pleasant afternoons. Trust, once shattered, couldn't be rebuilt in days. On their last day in town, my parents asked if they could take us to dinner. I agreed, selecting a casual restaurant where Elijah would be comfortable. As we ate, my father cleared his throat. We've been thinking, he said. We'd like to visit again, maybe for a longer time, if that would be all right with both of you. Elijah looked to me, waiting for my response. I took a sip of water, considering. I think that might be possible, I said finally. But I need you to understand something clearly. We're not picking up where we left off. If you want to be in our lives, you're starting from the beginning, building a relationship with us on our terms. My mother nodded eagerly. Of course, whatever you think is best. And you need to understand, I continued, that what happened between us, that doesn't just go away. I'm not the same person I was at 17. I won't be managed or controlled or made to feel less than. I've worked too hard for the life I have now. My father's expression was solemn. We see that, Mackenzie. We see the remarkable woman you've become, despite us, not because of us. We just want a chance to know that woman and her son. I glanced at Elijah, who was watching this exchange with interest. What do you think, buddy? Would you be okay with your grandparents visiting again sometime? He considered the question seriously before nodding. I think that would be okay. As long as they don't make you sad. My heart swelled with love for this perceptive, compassionate child. Then we'll try it, I decided. One visit at a time. Relief washed over my parents' faces. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely. It wasn't a happy ending wrapped in a neat bow. But it was a beginning of sorts, a tentative bridge being built over the chasm of the past. As we parted ways outside the restaurant, my mother hugged Elijah goodbye, then hesitantly reached for me. I allowed the embrace, though I didn't fully return it. Thank you, she whispered, for giving us this chance. Don't waste it, I replied simply. We watched them drive away, Elijah's hand in mine. Are you okay, Mom? he asked. I squeezed his hand. Yes, I think I am. And I was. Not because I had my parents back. I wasn't sure that would ever truly happen in the way it once had been, but because I had faced my past without letting it define me, because I had shown my son that forgiveness was possible without forgetting, that boundaries could be both firm and compassionate. Most of all, because I had proven to myself what I had known all along, that the scared, pregnant 17-year-old girl sleeping in a shelter had grown into a woman of strength, resilience, and grace, a woman who had built a beautiful life from nothing but trash bags on a porch and the unwavering determination to give her child everything she hadn't had. As Elijah and I walked to our car, I looked back at the life we had built together, just the two of us against the world. It wasn't the life I had imagined at 17, but it had turned out better than anything I could have dreamed. Hey Mom, Elijah said as we drove home, do you think people can really change? I thought about my parents, their failures, their regrets, their tentative steps toward redemption. I think they can try, I said finally, but it takes more than words. It takes consistent actions over time. Like when you say sorry isn't enough if I break something on purpose. I smiled. Exactly like that. Apologies are just the beginning. Real change means proving you've learned from your mistakes. So we'll see if they've really changed, he concluded. Yes, I agreed. We'll see. The future remained uncertain. I didn't know if my parents would maintain this effort, or if they would disappear again when it became difficult. I didn't know if I could ever fully trust them or if the relationship would always be marked by caution and restraint. But I did know this. Whatever happened with them, Elijah and I would be okay. We had survived the worst already. We had proven that family isn't just about biology or obligation. It's about choice, commitment, and unwavering love. I glanced at my son in the rearview mirror, this miracle who had changed everything, and felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. For him, for the life we had built, for the strength I hadn't known I possessed until I needed it. We're going to be just fine, I said, more to myself than to him. Elijah caught my eye in the mirror and smiled. I know, Mom, we always are. And in that moment, I knew it was true. Whatever came next, reconciliation or renewed distance, forgiveness or continued caution, we had already won, not with revenge or bitterness, but with the quiet triumph of a life well lived despite every obstacle. When they had thrown me away, they had believed they were cutting out a disease, removing a shameful mistake. But in reality, they had simply cast aside the most precious thing they would ever have, the chance to watch their daughter become the person she was meant to be, and to know the extraordinary grandchild who had never been a mistake at all, but a miracle.